Have you ever just felt that something was off when you're watching a show? I don't mean there's gonna be some massive plot twist slowly built up until wham! But just a feeling of awkwardness. The sort of feeling you get when you're talking to a friend and then someone who's a friend of your friend but not your friend comes up to you and your friend starts talking to them while you just stand there like one of them background characters in One Punch Man. Or even the foreground characters in One Punch Man. What the fuck is this, bro? And that's sort of the feeling I get with Frieren, Fern and Stark. And part of this is due to the lack of balance between the three. Fern and Stark have their own little romance brewing in the background, and Fern and Frieren have a mentor-apprentice dynamic. But aside from the dragon fight arc, we don't actually see just Frieren and Stark interacting much, creating this subtle schism in the initial trio. But everything changes when Frieren trolls a man about to die. In terms of Watsonian logic, the party needed a priest, and also Frieren wanted to change someone's life like Himmel did for her back then. But I think that if we look at it from a dualist angle, Sein is meant as a catalyst for Stark and Fern's relationship, metamorphosing from a teasing friendship into a quiet romance, and fulfills the balance that was missing before. The Freudian trio is one of the most common tropes in story writing, in both Western and Eastern media. But what is it actually? Basically, it is a way of writing characters that is built off the three attributes of the human psyche: id, ego, and superego, proposed by Sigmund Freud back in 1923. Wait, what's this? He thinks that we all wanted incest when we were 6 years old? Who's we?
That's not very Sigma, Freud.
Anyway, back to what I was talking about before. The id is basically one's instincts and impulsive emotions, which in this case is Stark, who is often shitting his pants before a fight, and sulking after being bullied by Fern. The superego is the complete opposite. It's the reflection of idealistic morals, or cultural rules, aiming for perfection in terms of ethics. This is embodied by Fern, who was raised by a priest and has a strong moral compass, demonstrated when she forces Frieren to help her village by killing the Einsam that was haunting the woods nearby. Despite these classifications though, the characters don't fit rigidly into the archetypes described by the trope. We know that Stark also has a rock-hard moral compass, as he helps villagers in every town he visits, making him Mr. Popular. And how could we forget Fern's pouty face? This flexibility helps him feel more real, since real people are an amalgamation of the id, ego, and superego, instead of caricatures of each element, acting as a suggestion rather than a rigid trope. As such, they can sometimes connect with each other, omitting the ego element, which is meant to be the mediator between the two. But then why is Sein so important in completing the Freudian trio? And why doesn't Frieren complete it? To answer this, you have to analyze the context of the journey taking place, as well as Fern and Stark's childhood. Fern was a war orphan and about to commit before Hecate saved her and raised her in isolation. Up until meeting Fern, her world revolved around Hecate and Frieren, as they were the only people she knew. And since Hecate is a morally questionable priest, and Frieren has the emotional intelligence of a walnut, with Sein describing her as an elderly child, Fern literally does not know how to interact with a guy her age, which causes her to construct a certain overinflated view of Stark, which then causes her to get upset when he doesn't meet them. On the other hand, Stark was a failure in his parents' eyes, and deems himself a coward for running away, leading to him losing his village and his family. He too has probably never talked to a member of the opposite sex the same age as him, because of his upbringing. And so you have these two characters who don't know how to interact with each other normally, and who initially built their relationship on trauma dumping. This may seem fine on the surface, like you look at the pre-Sein episodes and you think, huh, they're sort of getting along. Why does she keep calling him a perv? In this way, their relationship before Sein was like learning to run before learning to walk. You're meant to get to the deep shit and trauma dumping after you get past the small talk stage, and not the other way around. And since Frieren isn't exactly the most socially inept, she can't mediate when they get into a spat.
Wait, was he flirting with me?
Consequently, this explains why Sein is pivotal in completing the suggested Freudian trio, as he represents the ego, negotiating between Fern's at times unreasonable demands and Stark's sulkiness because he doesn't understand, much less meet, Fern's demands. Sein becomes the adult in the group when he joins, and basically gives couples counseling for the next 4 episodes, helping Fern and Stark's relationship go from a comedic relief with a side of PTSD bonding and slow growing admiration to one where they are open and friendly with each other, without Stark feeling like he's gonna be verbally abused at any second. Let's look at some ways he does this. In episode 14, we open with Stark storming out of their hostel, exclaiming how Fern is always so harsh on him and never hears him out. Sein walks in on this altercation, and Frieren exposition dumps that it was Fern's birthday and Stark forgot to get her a gift. Sein decides to add fuel to Fern's fire and indirectly backs Stark up by making the excuse of men not caring about birthdays and that he also didn't get her anything. Obviously, Fern responds in the most reasonable manner possible and kicks the shit out of him. But Sein, being the giga chad he is, just takes it, but agrees to buy her a present. After this, the adulting begins. Sein calmly explains how Fern's behavior can have a huge influence over Stark, expanding beyond just this instance, but to Fern's attitude overall, before pithily suggesting that they talk it out. At this point, Fern still doesn't fully trust Sein, since the gambling incident last episode, which can explain her line,
ただ女慣れしていそうで不快です
accusing him of being a fuckboy. But then, Sein just goes full Ayano Koji on her ass, instantly seeing through her and perceiving that she actually likes Stark, but doesn't know the best way to interact with him. So she instinctively resorts to slander. And then back to back, this man hits her with the brilliant move, choose whatever you want. Fern's answer of, nah, I'm good, mate. And then later,
私はシュタルク様の誕生日にプレゼントをあげました
completely reveals Fern's perspective of Stark. Sein then restates the fact that she overreacted earlier, adding on that Stark is a few slices short of a meatloaf in the interacting with girls department, much like herself, which logically persuades her to go easier on him. Finally, he was able to deduce that Fern and Stark chose a present together on his birthday, since Fern said no when he offered to buy her anything she wanted, and that it was a memory that Fern holds precious. This finally earns him the respect from Fern, as she now sees him as a dependable and perceptive adult who can give good advice, unlike a certain someone else. On top of plainly suggesting, oh, just talk to him, he's able to help Fern build up the courage to do this by guiding her into expressing her true feelings for Stark, and ends on the absolute bar of a line.
思いってのは言葉にしないと伝わらないんだぜ。
We as the audience know that Fern liked Stark all along. She believed in his resolve to protect the village from the dragon. She is fascinated by the fact that in every town they go to, people love Stark. And I guess Sein kinda represents us, the audience in this case, since he also understands her feelings and is able to tell her something so obvious, yet so crucial to good communication. Within 6 minutes, this man solved a grudge that might have never went away, and gained Fern's respect in the process, thereby controlling the superego's strive for idealism, the fact that you're meant to get a present on your birthday, and that,
If I give you a present, then I should get one back.
allowing the two to reconcile. After this intervention, their relationship immediately improves. But since the anime is called Frieren Beyond Journey's End, and not Fern-sama Love is War, such displays of their evolving bond is usually seen in the background, like Stark helping Fern off a log, them just happily talking in the background, and of course, the goddamn soiree. Aw, ain't it romantic? And I'm just sitting in a closet recording this fucking voiceover. But as we all know, Sein didn't stay for very long. His story simply took a different path to Frieren's, and we well know that his true goal was to find his friend and travel with a MILF, both of which he couldn't do if he was to continue traveling with the Frieren gang. And no, Frieren doesn't count as a MILF, guys. We do not fuck Frieren. But when he reaches the crossroads to pursuing his long-lost friend or staying with Frieren's party, he becomes stuck, torn between the new friends he's made and the promise he made to his old. Sein ultimately sticks to his original goal and decides to part ways in the middle of episode 17, but not before one last couples counseling session. This time around, Fern is mad at Stark because he touched her maliciously and without consent. Unlike Drake, however, Stark realizes he fucked up, but is nonetheless able to save the situation, since he still doesn't have enough experience to recover such a catastrophic fumble. And so, Sein is called in. Circling back to something I said near the start of the video, Sein completes the trio because he literally interacts with Stark and Fern equally, to create symmetry in their dynamic. And what happens next is the best example of this. One by one, Sein calls them into his room to have a little chat. He then literally uses solution-focused therapy, a short-term goal-focused therapy that helps clients change by brainstorming solutions rather than dwelling on the problem, to help Stark. First getting him to recount what happened, and then asking him what he wants to do to remedy the situation. Now obviously Stark says he wants to make up with Fern. But mirroring the last example, Sein instills the idea that people won't know how you feel unless you tell them. This time directing it to Stark instead. Stark probably knows this internally, but he just can't muster up the courage to do so, which is why Sein incentivizes this by reinforcing the fact that Stark is a good person at his core, and that all he has to do is be honest and let his emotions do the talking essentially. Furthermore, When it's Fern's turn for couples counseling, Sein assists Stark by basically doing half the apology for him, while also reminding Fern that Stark is still learning the ropes of dealing with women, and to cut him a little slack. And so, they reunite, and Sein heads out a couple minutes later. Even though his short was stay, Sein brought balance to Frieren's party, and bolstered Fern and Stark's relationship in ways Frieren could never. He perfectly fits the ego archetype in the Freudian trio, to mediate between Fern and Stark. And although this dynamic between the three is subtle, as it is not the centerpiece of the story, once you actually pay attention to it, you'll realize that Sein is more than just a good character on his own. Sure, his story is amazing, as Frieren drags him out of the vicious cycle of regret he was in, where he tied himself to the village whilst incessantly ruminating over not going on an adventure with his friend, but the way he adds to the other characters is something just as beautiful and should be highlighted. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, then you might also enjoy this other one, where I discuss the secrets of Frieren's ending. Anyway, take care, touch grass, and I'll see you next time. Peace.